All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Mindful Hunter podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jay Nichol, and we have a very widely and often requested topic for discussion today. I am going to do a deep dive on TRT, peptides, PEDs, and all other compounds, GH, etc., that fall under that umbrella. We're going to focus specifically on those types of compounds. I'm not going to talk about supplements because those are both two very independently large topics of discussion. And I think it would just be too unwieldy to talk about both of those in one podcast. So we're going to focus specifically on the kind of PED family of compounds. I will do a deep dive on supplements in a future podcast. Now, before I get into this podcast, I want to do a bit of a legal and health disclaimer. So first and foremost, I am not a doctor. Nothing that I talk about in this podcast should be understood to be medical advice or directions for things that you should do yourself. What I am going to do is share the experience I have had with experimenting with several of these compounds and the types of results I had, the negative and the positive. And then how you wish to interpret that is fully up to you. Secondly, there is no performance free lunch in life, okay? Every time you take an exogenous compound that is going to give you some type of performance benefit, there's going to be some type of cost to that. It could be a lack of energy later in the day. Like if you took a big drink of pre-workout before running up a hill, you're going to be more tired at the top of the hill than if you hadn't taken the pre-work, and it's going to take you longer to recover because you have essentially taken energy that should have been dispersed over several hours and consumed it within 10 or 15 minutes. You're still going to have the same recovery needs. Same thing goes for some of these compounds. For instance, if you want to have a super physiologically high level of testosterone, by default, you are going to get a super physiological level of estrogen. You're then going to need to take compounds to manage that estrogen. Those compounds are then going to have deleterious effects on your blood pressure, liver enzymes, etc. So I like to think of it like this. When it comes to supplements and PEDs and all the rest of it, it's basically like this teeter-totter. Like you can raise one side, but then another side is going to go down. So there's always this like fine balance of like, how much performance gain do I want in relation to how many side effects or negative health consequences am I willing to accept? So none of these things are 100% risk-free. And so if you're not currently doing any of these compounds, I'm not going to be the one to recommend to you that you start because there are risks inherent in all of these compounds. And I'm the last person on earth to tell other people what they should do. But I know a lot of people are either currently taking some and don't have the right advice, or they're contemplating, trying some of these compounds we're going to discuss, and they can't find reliably good or honest information about them. So that's why I want to do this podcast. But yeah, legally, not a doctor, and health-wise, listen, man, there's consequences to all this stuff. So if you want to take them, be aware. One last note before we dive into the meat and potatoes. Housekeeping for Mindful Hunter and Forged. So for Forged in the Backcountry, all sizes of boxers are currently in stock and shipping immediately. Everybody's been getting their stuff in less than a week. So it's kind of your last chance. I would say anything in, any orders in by the end of this week should theoretically get to you by the beginning of September. So yeah, if you want to order any boxers, t-shirts, hoodies, anything else, Forge store is fully stocked and shipping immediately. For Mindful Hunter outfitting, I have 2 spots left for archery mule deer in Alberta. These kind of happen mid-October, can either be the week of October 13th or the week of October 19th. Actually, I think that's the 13th and the 20th, whatever. You'll look at the calendar, you'll see what I mean. And then I've got room for one more mule deer hunter in British Columbia in November. This is an any weapon hunt, and I think currently right now, the last week of November is the spot that I have open. But if you want any information about any of those hunts, and Spring Bear for 2026 is filling up fast. So if you want a spot for Spring Bear, also get in touch with me, jay@mindfulhunter.com. Before we dive into the Q&A, let's get into my personal history, because I think that'll help give some context for all the feedback or the responses that I'm going to give to the questions. So I have been bodybuilding style training since I was 23 years old, and I'll be 47 next month. So I've been training for 24 years. So I've been around, dudes on gear that whole time. Oddly enough, most of you know my story. I was a junkie. I shot a bunch of dope with needles. There's decades of my life where, I was doing a lot of drugs. And you would think that I would have had no issues doing steroids. But for any of you who are my age, I think the propaganda around steroids was very effective in like the 80s and early 90s. Like, it just made you worry about just dumb shit, And so I always had this, I'm not touching that stuff kind of mentality. And I also assumed very early on that, if you hopped on, you could never get off. And I just didn't like the idea of having to take a substance for the rest of my life, especially once I sobered up, because then it was like, I don't need anything kind of mentality. So I never messed with anything. I'm talking no orals, no nothing. I did every over-the-counter supplement you can think of. Like if Muscle Tech came out with a new flashy product, I still remember when Lukic, Gakic, and Creakic came out, and I was taking like 42 pills a day, and it's essentially just, amino acids and creatine. But anyways, I never touched anything. And then I was 37 years old. We had just had Esme, my daughter, who's now 9. I was doing a full-time MBA, and I was running an engineering company full-time. We just got married a year before, and we just moved to a new house. It was like, other than the last 6 months, that was the busiest period I had ever had in my life. There's basically 2 years where I woke up at 4:00 in the morning and I went to bed at, 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I did not stop moving all day, every day. It was, looking back on it, I'm going to kind of look back on it fondly, because you're just so obsessed with everything that you're doing. But besides the point, a few months into that, maybe 6 months into that, maybe Esme would have been 5 or 6 months old, I was not feeling like myself. Zero libido. I would work. I've always been the kind of guy, like I would take breaks from the gym, and within like 3 to 4 weeks back at the gym, my t-shirts would be tight in my chest and my arms again. I'd put on 5-10 pounds pretty quick. My lifts would go up pretty quick. I've never been a guy who gets super jacked and super shredded, but I would always like beef up a little bit and then look like a gym bro pretty quickly. And I couldn't put on any mass. I had no energy in the gym. It was like, and I had no sense of competition. Like, I've always been fiercely motivated to succeed. And it was just like, it was lacking. And then I started doing a bunch of research, and that's when I kind of TRT was not nearly as big then as it is now, but I kind of came across a bunch of TRT research, and I'm like, I should probably go checked out. So in Canada, you're kind of screwed even till today. You kind of either have to luck out and get a decent doctor that will refer you to an endocrinologist, or be comfortable, doing the kind of blood work required to get testosterone, or to see if you even need it, or you go to a naturopath. Naturopaths themselves cannot prescribe testosterone, but they will usually have an MD on staff who can. So I went and seen this naturopath. I did a bunch of blood work. My testosterone levels came back at 200 nanograms per deciliter. Now, there are different ways to measure testosterone, available testosterone, free testosterone, all the rest. For the purposes of this conversation, we're just going to keep it to total testosterone. And even though nanograms per deciliter is not the primary unit used in Canada, it's the one that most people will understand, and the reference ranges kind of make the most sense. So mine came back at 200 nanograms per deciliter, and then an acceptable range would be between somewhere, let's say 400 to 1,000. Some ranges will tell you can be down as low as 300. I'm going to tell you, I think that's ridiculous. I think if you are a grown man and your testosterone is down around 300, you got to do something. I'm not saying you got to hop on test. There are other non-PED related options that can help you naturally elevate your testosterone, not to a massive degree, but certainly to some degree. And what I will do is I will save the conversation on all of those kind of like over-the-counter, non-permanent solutions for the supplement conversation. Anyways, it came back at 200, and like reference range was 400 to 1,000. And I'm like, well, no wonder I feel like dog shit. And so this guy though, and this is the problem with current, physicians and medical practice. He was like, we're going to put you on a gluten-free diet and take dairy out of your diet. And basically there's this, like, it's not a mold or a fungus. I think it's called Candida albicans. He's like, I think you have some kind of thing in your gut. I'm going to give you these pills. It was just basically a bunch of like frou-frou nonsense. I did it, for 4 months. I think I lost close to 15 pounds. I was actively competing in jiu-jitsu at the time. And I dropped an entire weight class, but lost all my strength. Like, it was just ridiculous, and none of it helped. And so I tried to pursue like an over-the-counter testosterone-based solution, but I couldn't find one. Like, I couldn't find somebody willing to have that conversation with me. And that's still the case today. And so for the first 4 years, I was on testosterone replacement therapy. It was an underground solution. And I won't get into that because it's not a topic for YouTube, but if you are a resourceful individual with access to the internet, these are not difficult compounds to find. And so I just did a ton of research. I'll be honest, got a lot of it off of Reddit. I didn't really know anybody personally that I could go talk to about it. So I just went on TRT. It wasn't even anything crazy. It was like, I think I was doing a couple 100 milligrams of testosterone per week, something like that, like what would be considered like a sports TRT or a TRT plus. And I don't know, maybe did that for a couple years. And then I decided I wanted to like really try bodybuilding. And this was before we moved in the city and I started training at West Coast and met a coach and like really, really got serious. But basically I did what I would call a couple of unsupervised cycles. Okay. And messed around with a bunch of different compounds, Tren, MPP, Deca, Winstrol, Anavar, Anadrol, Test, Masteron, Primo. It's not really the amounts and all that kind of stuff. Kind of played around with all that stuff, but in a very like personally experimental kind of way. And in hindsight, like ridiculous, like doses that were too high to even give you much more of a benefit, just create a bunch of side effects. Here's the thing. I talked about it a little bit in the intro. When you elevate your testosterone, your estrogen elevates at the same time. Now, modern thinking will tell you having high estrogen is not necessarily a bad thing. It's all side effect dependent. Some people can run a really high estrogen and feel great. I tend to be one of those people. My mood is better, my libido is better, skin quality is better. The funny thing about running gear is that most of your side effects come from managing estrogen. So yes, there are side effects from testosterone. You do have an elevated level of cancer, prostate cancer specifically. It will affect your blood pressure. But really, what happens is you take testosterone elevates your estrogen. You take a compound to manage your estrogen, aromatase inhibitors. There's an enzyme, aromatase, that gets produced by the liver that helps process testosterone and thus in turn creates estrogen. And if you inhibit this enzyme, you inhibit the production of testosterone. There's a couple different mechanisms by which you can do this. The two main ones, the two most modern ones are Arimidex and Aromasin. Aromasin would be considered maybe a little milder and safer than Arimidex. There's some old school ones that are just like brutal. They nuke your estrogen. Here's the thing. If you crash your estrogen to zero, it is very, very, very bad. It will mess with your head. It will mess with your physiology. And so it's this like fine balance. When you decide, I want super physiological levels of test, you are then committing for most people to enter into some kind of estrogen management dance that usually, if you know what you're doing, requires blood work. So you'll have to go on a cycle, wait 4 to 5 weeks to reach blood saturation levels, take what you think is an appropriate amount of an aromatase inhibitor, go in, get blood work, and then go, oh, I'm too high, oh, I'm too low, adapt, wait 5 to 6 weeks, go back in and recheck. After you've done this 4 or 5 times, like you start to recognize like, okay, I know for myself, I aromatase very heavily, which means I need to take more than regular amounts of Arimidex in order to manage my estrogen. I also know that I feel very good and operate very good and have very good, blood work on relatively high estrogen. So I also don't get side effects. I don't get acne. I don't get gyno. None of that stuff. It doesn't really bother me. Obviously, there's limits to this. If it gets sky high, you have to be concerned. Now, the next question people are going to ask a lot is about blood work. So for Americans, you're going to think this is ridiculous. But in Canada, you cannot go in and request your own blood work. I can't go to a doctor. I can't go to like a lab or anywhere and just say, hey, I want to get my testosterone checked. It's illegal. You have to go to a doctor and he has to give you a referral or basically a prescription in order to go to the lab and get the blood work. And they will only test the markers that the doctor tells them to. And a lot of these doctors will just send you packing. And before I forget, I'll get to that point when I get to it. But a lot of these doctors will not allow you. I mean, there were times, even before I hopped on gear, I was experimenting with going into ketosis and doing like fat-only diets. And when you do that, you got to worry about your cholesterol and all kind of stuff. And I can remember even going to a doctor and being like, hey, I'm doing a bunch of really experimental dietary stuff. I'd like to be able to come in once every couple months and just give you a list of blood markers. And he just totally shot me down. And I was like, what? This is insanity. Like, this is my body, my money. Like, can I not, like, why can't I just test what I want to test in my own body? And it's a testament to like how insane Canada has gotten over the years. But if you live close to the border, like I do, like 45 minutes from Blaine, Washington, you can literally just drive over the border, go to like private MD labs. You fill out a little form online before you go. You just put a check mark beside all the stuff you want tested. They even have something called the Bodybuilder panel. It's got everything, your liver enzymes, your AST, your ALT, all of your lipids, all of that kind of stuff. And it's $150, man. You drive across the border, give a bunch of blood, go home. 3-4 days later, you get an email, you log on, there's all your results. So for the first like 5 years of being on gear, I just drove across the border every single time I wanted to get blood work done. And I will tell you this, if you're going to go on this journey, even for mild TRT, you should be definitely doing blood work. And if you're in your 40s, you should be doing blood work anyways, like at least once a year, just to see where you're at, your lipids, your liver, creatinine. I'm not going to do like a blood work deep dive, but there's a lot of things that you should be looking at. So that was basically what I did for the first, let's just say 5 years for a round number. I did all these like kind of dumb cycles, not all these, like the last couple of years, I basically did like 2 or 3 kind of dumb cycles, ended up putting on, a decent amount of muscle, but also ended up putting on a decent amount of fat at the same time, which is like, it's such a classic journey when people hop on gear. They don't know what they're doing. Their diet is shit. Their sleep is shit. They think they're going to do drugs. The one thing that doing a bunch of gear has taught me is that I have so much more respect, even for professional bodybuilders. Like, people think the gear does everything. It's bullshit, man. Like, it's a bit of a helping hand. Don't get me wrong. But if you don't have your sleep dialed, your diet dialed, your training dialed. Like, you can shoot as much gear as you want. You are not going to turn into Ronnie Coleman. Like, trust me, I tried. It doesn't happen. Your genetics are a huge limiting factor as well. So anyways, I go on this journey, do all this dumb stuff, experiment with all this stuff, kind of, have some wins, have some losses, whatever, do a bunch of different compounds. Then I move into the city, and I decided I want to do a bodybuilding competition. So I find a coach, I switch gyms, and then that's when I started getting what you would like most people would experience as sort of like classical kind of gear journey. You got a coach, he's kind of telling you what to take. When I met this coach, he introduced me to a naturopath in Vancouver. His name's Dr. Brian Martin. The clinic is called Changes. And he has what I would call a very progressive approach towards testosterone replacement therapy. And you can find a lot more of these clinics now. In the States, it's a joke. They got Merrick, they got all these other places. You can almost just do it online. But basically, I could just go in and tell this guy, listen, this is what I've been doing. This is what my plans are. This is what my health concerns are. I want to, monitor my health. I want to go on prescription TRT. I'd like to go on prescription GH, all that. And after a bunch of appointments and a bunch of tests, I was good to go. And now literally, if I want to give blood, I just phone, I make an appointment. I tell Dr. Martin, these are the levels I want checked. He fills out the forms. I give blood right at that clinic. It's fantastic. Yes, it costs some money. It's actually a little bit more expensive than just going to the States, but it's done here at home. He's very supportive. He understands the risks of a lot of the compounds that I was doing. He would look at the blood work, give me his, best advice. Obviously, he would never recommend, any underground stuff or any illegal stuff, but he was always willing to, give me a practical advice based on my goals and my blood work and my current kind of health status. And that's what I would recommend. Like, don't mess around with the forums and the underground stuff and like figuring out your own cycles and all that kind of stuff. We are far enough along now, and there are enough of these clinics. Spend the money, go see a professional. Get your blood work monitored before you hop on anything if you're considering going on TRT. And I will get into like who it might be beneficial for and who it might not be beneficial for later on. But like, just do it, because it's the healthiest way to do it in the long run. You're going to be managing side effects the most effectively in the long run. It's just the best bet. So I go in, I see this guy. In Canada, we are allowed prescription GH. I don't think you are in the States. And so literally, I go, this is my goals. Now, obviously, none of these prescriptions were at super physiological levels, but now I had a place where I could get legal testosterone, legal growth hormone, legal Arimidex, and I could go in and get my blood work checked regularly. And then I went on essentially a 4-year, like super intense bodybuilding journey. So I started at 209 pounds. I think it was in September of that year. And it was a year and a half later. It might've been before September. Anyways, by the January of 2 years later, which was probably a year and a half afterwards, I was 273 pounds and did all the like classic bodybuilding stuff, like Deca and D-ball in the off season with a bunch of tests and like eating 6,000 calories and bulking for 6 or 7 months and then cutting for 2 or 3 months. And basically I did classic bodybuilding cycles and classic bodybuilding eating again for the next 4 years. At my peak, I was 272 pounds, because when I finally did my first show on stage, well, the morning I got on stage, I weighed 209 pounds. So it's kind of funny that I started my journey at 209 pounds and I kind of ended my first phase of my journey at 209 pounds. But in the interim, I put on 63 pounds over 2 years and then lost that 63 pounds over probably 5 months. Obviously, the 209 on stage was way different than the first 209. I mean, I was shredded. You could see my spleen. It was crazy. And so I did one more year of bodybuilding. I got all the way back up to 270. And then when I went on stage the next year, I weighed 213. And so a real good way, the only real way, this whole like, dude, it's all these online coaches who are like, oh, my clients put on 20 pounds of lean mass in 3 months. You are full of shit. I am telling you right now, with the best drugs on the planet, like a grown man able to put on 10 pounds of lean mass in a year is a feat, an impressive feat. Maybe the first year you hop on gear, you're going to put on 20 or 30 pounds, but I'm telling you, half of that is fat and water. To put on 10. And so essentially what I had done is put on 4 pounds in a year. And I had done a lot of compounds. I had eaten a ton of food. I'd had really high blood pressure. I was walking around like a water buffalo. And like that was and I knew it was going to be my last competition anyways. Prepping takes way too much time away from your family. It is the most, like if people think that an obsession to backcountry hunting is like narcissistic, bodybuilding preps are the worst, man. Like I was useless to my wife and my kid. But it was one of these things I wanted to check off. My wife is this amazing woman, man. Like she's always been, listen, if there's these things that you have to do, let's do them, but you're going to do them in a controlled way for a set amount of time. And when they're done, they're done. Then you come back and you take care of business. And so she was great, man. But having only gained 4 pounds and my look was way better, I performed way better, I placed way higher. Like it was a respectable look for a 44-year-old man, 213 pounds. But it was like, okay, I knew by then I'd hung out with enough bodybuilders. It's like, listen, I am not genetically built for this. I was watching guys at the gym taking half what I was taking, blowing up. It was just like, I just don't have the genetics for this. Also, this whole time I'd been trying to backcountry hunt. And I'm telling you right now, trying to backcountry hunt at 272 pounds, I tell this story all the time. My first real deep winter goat hunt, I was 269 pounds and I had a 93 pound pack. So I was like 372 pounds on snowshoes. Like that is insanity. Like there is nothing complementary about truly bodybuilding and backcountry hunting. Like the more muscle you put on, the less effective you are in the backcountry. I've literally spent the last 2 years trying to undo everything that I did while bodybuilding. Now, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because the kind of mental strength that I was able to develop, both through bulking and through prepping, it's like, I almost think everybody should do a bodybuilding show just for that. Like it is so hard mentally. Anyways, and I now have a base of mass. Plus I've been lifting for 25 years. So it's like, I have a base kind of musculoskeletal system that is very strong and very well developed. So when I go to cut weight, I can get pretty aggressive and like a lot of muscle sticks around. So there were benefits to what I was doing. But if your passion is backcountry building, doing a big cycle and putting on a bunch of muscle is the last thing in the world that you should be doing. So again, during that whole time, again, tons of orals, like everything you can think of, man, like Winstrol, Anavar, D-Ball, Anadrol, Halo, all the injectables, Tren, Masteron, Test, all that shit. And then I go through that period. And then after my second competition, the hunting thing was clearly where my passions lied. And I said, okay, I got to transition from out of bodybuilding and I'm going to focus solely on hunting and I'm going to make all my fitness training around hunting. And I'll be honest, I said that. It took well over a year before I was actually able to commit to that. Here's the thing. When I'm like not actually cutting for a show and I'm like medium leanness, I'm walking around at like 245, 250 pounds and I'm 6'1", jacked. And that is a very challenging thing to walk away from psychologically. I'm just telling you, like, I know it's dumb and arrogant and whatever, but you get used to like being the jack dude who's 250 who walks in the room. And it's like, you get used to kind of how that affects people when you're talking to them, and you get used to like how people treat you. And it's just a very hard thing to like, okay, I'm not going to be a big jack dude anymore. I even liked, dude, you go to parent events and like the other parents of your daughters, kids, friends are like, Jesus, man, who's this guy? And then, you even playing with your kid, your daughter's friends, like, oh my God, your dad's so big. It's like you take your kid to the pool and it's just like, I'll be honest, it's like, it's very superficially rewarding being like that big and jacked. And it's not something you just shut off overnight. And it took me, a year, 2 years to like be able to like just slowly come down, just keep taking off the weight. I was 222 pounds this morning. I have been to the gym to lift weights one time in the last 3.5 months. It's not because I don't want to. It's just because I don't have any time. And when I do have time to train, my training is focused on my performance in the backcountry. So when I have time, my programming will allow me to lift 1 or 2 days a week, but those are the last priority days of the week. So if I don't hit the other stuff first, I don't get those lifting days. So I'm still 6'1", 225. I still look good with my shirt off, for my wife. It's fine, but I'm not that big jack dude anymore. So then we enter what I want to call like, I wish the phase I had have just started from the very beginning. Which is basically what I've been doing for the last 2 years. And we're going to call that TRT plus. So an average TRT dose, everybody is going to be a little bit different, is going to be around 120 milligrams per week. That's probably going to put most guys usually around like a 5 to 6x response. So it's going to put most guys in that 800 to 900 nanograms per deciliter, which is very healthy testosterone range. So be like your average 21-year-old. You know what I mean? Like you can operate just fine on that. It's a low enough dose that you don't have to take estrogen. The old school philosophy used to be you take a bunch of testosterone, you measure your estrogen, you then take as many aromatase inhibitors as you need to manage your estrogen. The new school is more like this. You take, even when you want to run cycles, you take as much testosterone as you can until it elevates your estrogen to unhealthy levels. And then you taper back a little bit. Because it turns out the aromatase inhibitors are actually worse for you than the testosterone or most of the other compounds because of their effect on your lipids, like your cholesterol, your LDL and your HDL, and even your liver enzymes, your AST and your ALT. And so this was all stuff I'd learned through the course of my bodybuilding career. So when I started taking like just regular TRT, I dropped the aromatase inhibitors altogether. Even if I go and do like a little mini cycle, maybe I'll take like, a milligram of Arimidex a week or something like that, but very, very, very minor, not like it was before. And it's a much healthier way to approach it. And so now my current cycle is I do 100 milligrams of test and 100 milligrams of Primo a week. That's it. I do 1 shot per week. Yes, there's a lot of evidence to say that splitting up your shots is beneficial, leveling out your peaks and valleys and all that kind of stuff. I've done everything under the sun. I've done daily injections. I've done weekly injections. I've done bi-weekly injections. I personally feel zero difference. My blood work looks zero difference, at 1 injection or 3 injections per week. And it's way easier to manage. I wake up on Sunday mornings. I hate pinning myself. You feel like a pin cushion after years of doing this shit. I wake up Sunday morning. I do my 1 injection, and that's all I got to worry about. This question is going to come up later on, but I'm going to get into it right now. A lot of people are wondering, what about when you go into the backcountry? Here's the thing. It takes, because of half-lives, a half-life of a drug is the amount of time it takes for half of that drug to leave your system. And it's basically like considered how long that dose is effective in your system. So like an Advil would have like a half-life of 4 hours, right? Because you can take another one after 4 hours. And after about 4 hours, it's not doing as much as it was before. It's not completely out of your system, but it's enough that you could have another one if you want. So the half-life of testosterone, depending on the ester that you're using, if it's an enanthate, a cypionate, there's other esters with different half-lives. But let's just say it's 5 days. And you need to do about 4 to 5 half-lives worth before you reach blood saturation levels. So it's not like you take one shot of testosterone and your blood levels get raised. You'll know this if you go into a doctor to go get on TRT. He's going to tell you to go take your prescription and leave for 4 to 5 weeks. Do your prescription for 4 to 5 weeks and then come back to get blood tests, because then you're going to see where your blood levels are. What this means is that if you miss a shot, it's not like you instantly have low testosterone. In fact, it doesn't even really show up for the next 3 to 4 weeks. So if I'm going to the backcountry for like 10 days, I don't care. I take a shot before I leave and I take a shot when I get back. Like, this is not rocket science. It's not the end of the world. I've gone 2 to 3 weeks without a shot over the last few years. I don't break down in tears or instantly lose 20 pounds. Like, it's not this big grave, thing. Ideally, once a week is about the limit of how far apart you should push them. And if I'm going on vacation, that's another reason I like having legal TRT. I take my TRT with me. Sometimes if I'm going to the backcountry on really long trips, I will take one shot with me. I don't like doing that primarily because of hygiene. You're in the backcountry, everything's dirty. Taking out a syringe and sticking it in your ass after, sleeping in the same underwear for a week is just not a good idea. If you have to, you bring some alcohol wipes, and yes, you can definitely, take care of it in an appropriate manner. But if it's going to be 10, 12 days, I don't worry about it at all. I take one before I leave. I take one when I come back. I've never felt any notable difference whatsoever. So yeah, back on track. I basically enter the last 2 years of my life where I do what you would call it sports TRT or TRT plus. I'm wondering how far I should dig into this. So, okay, this podcast is not meant to be a steroid deep dive specifically so that you can do better cycles, but I think a little bit of knowledge about that whole family of drugs is going to help us understand why we're going to do what we're going to do later on. So you basically have 3 different groups of steroids in the steroid family tree. You have DHTs, dihydrotestosterones, you have testosterone itself, and then you have nandrolones, or they're called 19-nors because I think it's like 19-nor testosterone. Now, DHTs are things like Masteron, Primo, Anavar, Winstrol. Testosterone is like testosterone, D-ball, Equipoise, Turinabol, and then your 19-nors, the big ones are Tren and Deca. Now, for our purposes, testosterone, we're just going to consider testosterone the middle of the trunk of the tree. Okay, so we're going to consider that the base level of aromatization, the base level of anabolic to androgenic ratio. Okay, the reason these steroids are called AAS is they are anabolic androgenic steroids. Okay, anabolism is the act of building muscle. Catabolism is the act of eating away or losing that muscle. And so androgenic or androgen, an androgenic mechanism is like normally like sexually derived characteristics, like a deep voice, hair on your face, hairy back, all this kind of stuff. So every steroid has a ratio, an AA ratio of like how much anabolism to how much androgenicity. And so as steroids have developed over the years, the newer ones have a higher level of anabolism compared to the androgenicity. This is why chicks stick to things like Primo and stuff, because it has a much higher anabolic impact with lower risk of virilization, which is what happens in females when they take too much testosterone. They just start turning into dudes, man. Seen it happen to a lot of girls. And it's like, once they cross that line, there's no crossing back. And I support a free society. And if some chick wants to get to 300 pounds, jacked with a jawline and has to shave every day, knock yourself out, lady. I support your free ability to do this, but it's like, but you're paying quite the price. Anyways, so testosterone would have that base level. Let's just, for sake of arguments, we're going to call it 50-50. So for every, 1 unit of anabolism, you're going to get 1 unit of androgenicity. Now, DHTs, for the most part, are going to have, they are considered dry compounds because DHTs don't aromatize. And for the most part, they are going to have a higher level of anabolism compared to the androgenic elements. So earlier, when I said I do testosterone and primo, I do that because 100 milligrams of testosterone with 100 milligrams of primo is technically better than 200 milligrams of testosterone, because the 100 milligrams of primo has a higher anabolic effect for the androgenic components, and it doesn't aromatize. So I'm not gonna create any more estrogen from taking that primo. A lot of people do the same thing with mast. The old school cycles used to be like 1,200 milligrams of testosterone and like 400 milligrams of DECA. That would be like an off-season blast. The new school of cycles are like 250 milligrams of testosterone and 1,200 milligrams of masteron. Because the DHTs don't aromatize, you can't do a DHT only cycle because it will shut down your androgynous ability to create testosterone, which you absolutely need in your body because there's all these other side effects that are going on at the same time, like the estrogen production. Like you can't have zero estrogen. If you only did 500 grams of primo, you would have zero estrogen because it would shut down your own androgynous testosterone production, but you wouldn't have any compounds in you that could be aromatized to estrogen. So a lot of people, when they're developing cycles, will talk about a test base. So that could be 250 a week, could be 450 a week, could be whatever a week, but you run your test base and then you do this like cocktail of other substances on top to get the desired effects with the minimal amount of side effects. 19 NORs, just don't do them. Trust me, I've done a few cycles of tren. Yeah, tren is the closest thing to what people think steroids are going to do. It actually helps partition the way that you metabolize carbohydrates. So it's like you get leaner, but dude, you sweat when you sleep. You start having like violent ideations. You start like tren and halo are the only things I've done where I totally understood roid rage. Like I was just like walking around seething at the world for weeks. And tren, I'm not going to get into it because it's like a little too personal, but like your libido goes through the roof. Like it's unmanageable. You can't focus on work. You can't focus on anything. And it's neurotoxic. It will literally eat your fucking brain. Okay. The only people on the planet who should be doing, tren are literally competitive bodybuilding athletes. And I know a lot of dudes who even compete at a professional level who won't mess with tren anymore. So if you're some little hobbyist and you think you're going to go do a little cycle of tren, just let me save you the trouble. Stop. It is terrible. It is the worst steroid of all the steroids for many reasons. I've seen people blow up their marriages. I've seen people lose their jobs. It's brutal, man. And you get this very like blood pressure-y look to you. Like when you see those guys walking around and they're like beet red like a tomato and they're shredded, but it's kind of like a gross looking shredded. 99% of the time that's tren. Anyways, DECA, I also don't mess with. It's a very classic compound. I don't like it. A lot of people experience anxiety on DECA. It'll fuck with a lot of people's libido and give them erectile dysfunction. Like it's just stay away from it. So for like hobbyists, I really, for me, and I don't mess with orals at all anymore. Orals hammer your liver. And so The only real reason to do an oral is it's a fast acting compound. So if you're in a competition prep and you need something that's going to like work this second, or you want to take it as kind of a pre-workout compound, or you're already jamming like 20 mils of oil in your body every week and you're like maxed out, but you still want to take more gear, okay, you're left with orals. But for a regular dude, there's nothing that an oral is. Here's the thing. All of these compounds are all doing the same thing. They just all do them with slightly different mechanisms and with slightly different side effects. So the goal is, how can I achieve the performance benefits that I'm looking for with the minimal amount of side effects? And if that's the question you're asking, orals are not even in the picture as a potential answer. And so a little bit of test, a little bit of DHT. That's either going to be Masteron, or Primobolan. Primobolan is much more expensive and can be much harder to find real Primo. So for that reason, a lot of people choose to go with Masteron. Anyways, the last 2 years, basically, that's all I've been doing. Every now and then I'll ramp it up for a little bit if I've got some like specific goals or something like that. But I'll be honest, that's like just for fun. It's not necessary. There's some really good questions in here that relate to like cycles and hunting, and I'm gonna get into all that. But essentially, there's my background with I never even mentioned GH. Let me give the quick background on GH. So I've had a GH prescription for the last 5 years, and I will get into growth hormone, secretagogues, and peptides, and all that kind of stuff in a minute. But let's keep the conversation, because I'm Canadian and we can get real GH. We'll talk about real GH first. So I have had a prescription for GH for almost the last 7 years, and sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. I haven't done it in months. It's incredibly expensive. Even if you want to do 2 units a day, would cost you $500 a month in Canada. That's prescription. I walk into Costco, I pick up my GH pens, I keep them in my fridge, and I do a couple units of GH every day. Let's talk about the benefits, the myths, the fallacies, all that kind of stuff about GH. If you have a shitload of money and you are looking for longevity benefits, you just want like slightly better health, slightly nicer skin, just all that kind of stuff, yeah, 2 units a day is perfect. I bet you there is not a rich person on the planet that's not doing 2 units of GH minimum a day. There's little to no drawbacks or side effects from taking that little of a dose. It's like 120 milligrams of test a week. Like, you're just replacing like your natural levels. So your body is not overproducing anything in a compensatory response. However, from a performance or muscle building capacity, 2 units of GH won't do shit. Literally, you won't feel it. You won't see it. Nothing will happen. The only exception would be for recovery. And we'll get into peptides later on, but if I'm going to do a cycle of BPC 157 and TB 500, and I can be asked to actually go to the pharmacy and pick up some GH, if you threw in 2 units of GH on top of that cycle, that would be a very favorable synergistic cycle to run with. But for 99% of the people listening to this podcast, GH is a waste of your time. And let me tell you why. By the time you get your GH high enough, like where you're really going to see some benefits, let's say 6 units a day. You also have to take GH in the morning and the afternoon, and realistically should be taking it 3 times a day. Like if you were going to do 6 units, you should be pinning 2 units 3 times a day. Now they come in these cool little pens. You do it subcutaneous. It's not the worst, but you've got to be near your fridge. You got to keep it refrigerated. So it's like doing this on hunting trips or this on business trips or any of that kind of shit is out. And so that's part of the reason why I just stopped using GH, because it's like, this is just a pain in the ass and it's super expensive. And there's mild benefits, but not major benefits. But the thing is, once you get it up to like, let's say 6 units a day, and I know guys who are doing way more than that, it starts to negatively impact your metabolism and your blood glucose levels, which means you then need to start taking T3 or T4, which is like a thyroid, synthetic thyroid supplement to adjust your metabolic rate, or insulin. And you can either take like a slow fasting or a fast acting. Fast acting insulin is very dangerous, but this is exactly like the conversation we were having before with testosterone and estrogen. There's no free lunch with any of this shit. And if you want to take one compound in your body and ramp it up to super physiological levels, other compounds in your body are going to react in a compensatory manner. And then you're going to have to take third compounds in order to manage those second compounds. And there's like this cascading effect of bullshit. And it's like after years and years of experimenting with all this, it's just not worth it. Like, yeah, okay, if you are a professional athlete and there are short periods in your life where you are looking to either put on muscle or you're competing for a world championship in something and you've got access to a doctor, yes, 100%. These dudes are running GH, T3, insulin, 4 of other different, anabolic related compounds. And yes, it will create some of the best athletes on earth. But again, for 99% of the dudes listening to this podcast that just want to feel good, bang their wife like a man should, be in a good mood on a regular basis, have an acceptable level of body fat, and be able to go in the backcountry without just fucking bonking, don't waste your time with 99% of the compounds that are out there. If you are going to go on TRT, a little bit of TRT is all you need. You don't need orals. You don't need any of the other compounds. You don't need the GH. That being said, I did a lot of GH for a long time. So I have that. All of that is coming from experience. And I'll tell you right now, I have an active prescription. I could go walk into Costco and get it. I can afford it. I don't do it. It's just not worth the pain in the ass. I didn't even mention blood pressure. You start retaining water. You get numb hands when you start doing too much GH. And it's primarily because you're retaining so much water, your blood pressure goes through the roof. It's ridiculous. That's the other thing. Your blood pressure starts getting so high when you do all these compounds. You start needing to be taking like, not statins, because statins are for lipids, but I can't remember the family of drugs that affect your blood pressure. But you start needing to be taking like telmisartan, is a very popular drug for blood pressure. So it's just like this constant dance. How much of this can I take before this other thing gets elevated? And then I got to start taking this third thing. Like it's a nightmare. Okay. I think hopefully I didn't forget anything, but that's basically my history with all of this stuff. So now let's dive into the Q&A itself and we'll start, seeing what people want to know. First up, experience with ipamorelin or other HGH releasing peptides. So this question is worded in a very interesting way, and I like it, and I don't like it. So we're going to break GH into 2 categories: actual growth hormone and secretagogues or GH-like peptides that create a response in your body telling it to grow or create more GH. Now, actual GH comes in 2 categories, and that would be pharma and non-pharma. Now, it used to be that all non-pharma was considered garbage. And so if you wanted to trust your GH, you bought pharma. You bought it underground or you bought a prescription for it, and you could trust it. And it would be like Serostim or wow, it's been a while. I can't even remember what the name of mine was. There's only 3 or 4 like major name brands of GH. And then there's all this underground GH. And there's no real way of knowing how effective it is until you start taking it. And the funny thing is you really only know it's effective when you start getting the side effects. Like you jack up to 6 to 8 units a day and your hands start going numb. And you're like, oh, I got the good stuff. Then you have all these GH-like peptides that we should start by talking about what a peptide is. And I'm going to kind of dumb this down a little bit, but essentially a peptide is a compound that you can take exogenously that will start a cascade of events metabolically that will create a trigger for your body to make something that it can already make, but it wasn't currently going to make. Okay. but it's not like taking peptides are not like exogenous compounds. Like when you take testosterone, you can just keep taking it and taking it and taking it. And the more of it you take, the more effect you get. Now, obviously, the more side effects and all that other kind of stuff, but like it is an exogenous compound. You are pumping it into your system. The GH like peptides, it's only going to help you create your own growth hormone. So it's like there's a set limit that your body will actually be capable of producing. It doesn't matter how much more of these peptides you take. It's like BPC 157 and TB 500. You can't just keep taking more. Those peptides are actually triggering your body's natural recovery response and kind of asking it to create like more of one substance and direct it to more of a specific area. But it's not making something from nothing. It's just telling your body to be a little bit more intentional about what it makes and where it puts it. And so there's a very low limit on the effect that a lot of these things can have realistically. So for me, I don't mess with any GH-like peptides. I don't think a little bit of extra GH the juice is just not worth the squeeze. I think like you got better things to worry about. You're going to pin yourself a few times a day. Maybe you'll get you would be better focused on like, how can I get a better night's sleep? Most of your GH gets released overnight. If you're getting better sleep, you are more likely to have more GH released overnight. I'm telling you, instead of like wasting your money on peptides, GH related peptides, again, unless you're some kind of professional athlete, you're better off like, okay, how can I fine tune my diet? How can I lower inflammation? How can I sleep better? How can I get a little leaner? How can I lose a little bit of body fat? All of these things will have a better impact on your quality of life than messing around with GH peptides. So in my opinion, for dudes like us, waste of time. Recommendations for small performance enhancements in training, mostly recovery focus. Listen, all of these questions that are going to have very boring answers. People are looking, it's like get your house in order first, okay? If you are eating perfectly, sleeping perfectly, and training perfectly, then, okay, sure, maybe adding in a little something else would help. But if you're not doing those things perfectly, then starting to add stuff in, it's like bubble gum and duct tape. Like it's just Bondo on a car. Like it's not going to have so what I would say to this Indian gentleman who wants a small improvement in his recovery and his focus, sleep better, sleep more, eat cleaner, more whole foods, like clean up everything that's going around, have better training, have better sleeping, have better eating. When those things are completely dialed, I mean, the small stuff is going to be the over-the-counter stuff I'm going to recommend. Like, are you getting 10 to 20 grams of creatine per day? Are you getting 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass? Are you taking a fish oil supplement? Like very minor things like that. Now, what he's probably alluding to here is a group of drugs referred to as SARMs, which are selective androgen receptor modulators. When these first started coming out, a lot of people thought these were like the next family of steroids because they were apparently designed so well. Again, if we go back to that like anabolic androgenic ratio, these were just all anabolic. That's why it's selective androgen receptor modulator, because they would choose what to affect and what not to affect. Here's the deal, man. It's a bunch of nonsense. Yes, there are some performance benefits to be had by SARMs. People ask about cardarine all the time, MK677. The amount of cancer that has been shown to cause in rats is shocking. Here's the problem with the newer compounds. People think there's a free lunch. Here's the other problem with the newer compounds. They have not been tested on humans in a laboratory setting. Testosterone has been around forever. Other than creatine, it is probably one of the most tested performance compounds on planet Earth. And people are like, oh, I don't want to do 100 grams of testosterone because then I'm going to be taking steroids. So I'm going to pump myself full of cancer-inducing SARMs because, psychologically, then I'm not on gear. And it's just like, it's such an asinine way of approaching things. I have definitely messed with 2 or 3 SARMs early on. Remember those first few years where I didn't have any coaching and I was just messing around? I didn't really see that much of a benefit. You never know if they're real. Just in my opinion, again, this falls into the family of stuff that for like regular dudes who are just looking for a bit of a performance increase and like a better quality of life, stay away from all of them. They are not worth the time. I think now peptides fall into a different category than SARMs. But again, if you're looking for a small performance increase and recovery, work on your sleep, your diet, and your training. Okay. Experience with BPC 157. This is what half the conversation is about here. So in my opinion, BP 157, which actually stands for body protection compound. It's a hilarious thing, but yep, that's what it stands for. Should be used synergistically with TB 500, which I believe is thymosin beta 500. There's a couple different thymosin betas. Anyway, they act synergistically. You don't have to use them together, but in my experience, I've run a bunch of cycles of both, and the response that you get is better when you run them at the same time. All right, so both BPC 157 and TB 500 are good for soft tissue injury, so they're going to promote tissue healing. They're going to help support joint and tendon recovery. Recovering tendons and ligaments are particularly challenging because there doesn't tend to be a lot of blood flow in those issues. BPC 157 specifically has been shown to really improve gut health. Might be the one exception when an oral form of BP 157 would be sufficient. They are both going to enhance angiogenesis. So this is the formation of new blood cells in damaged tissues. And this is what I was getting at earlier when I was like, there's no miracle drugs. It's just going to help your body pinpoint where it should do what it already can do. And then finally, they're both going to help reduce inflammation, but they both do these through different mechanisms, which is why I think they're best taken in conjunction. Now, I'm not giving you advice on what you should do, but in my research, the best dosage kind of regimen that I have come up with is a 6-week cycle. I've run much shorter ones. Here's what I find. If I run these compounds for like 2 to 3 weeks, I will get temporary, it will temporarily alleviate the symptoms. But then in 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks, it comes back. If I take the time and I'm disciplined enough and I just run the whole cycle for 6 weeks, it's like there's a fundamental recovery. So my recommendation is to run these for 6 weeks. It's also not cheap. I shouldn't have said my recommendation. What I have found through my own experimentation is that the best results were achieved when I ran them for 6 weeks. So again, when you're talking about half-lives, these compounds have different half-lives, which is why I don't like buying blends, because they have different dosage rates and they have different dosage schedules. So TB 500 should be taken every couple days, and BPC 157 needs to be taken 2 to 3 times per day. Yes, you have to inject all of this. Your body can't really orally metabolize enough BPC 157 to make it worthwhile. So any of these pills you're seeing, if you're already injecting some, can there be some small added benefit from like a little bit of extra oral? Sure. But are you just going to take some BPC 157 pills and have it fix your ACL? Nope, not at all. You have to inject. And here's the thing, by the end of one of these cycles, you will feel like a pincushion. When you are sticking yourself 3 times a day with a sling pin for BPC 157 and then every other day with another one for TB 500, it sucks. It's brutal. But it was one of those things, like it is, USADA banned it for a reason. Like it has a legitimate effect, like 100%. So as far as the dosage regimen, I like to do 500 micrograms of BPC 157 twice a day. It would be better to do it 3 times a day, but it's a pain in the ass. Like, you got to be at home in the middle of the day. You got to be close to your fridge. Like, I always forget. So I used to do 300 3 times a day, but it was like I would always miss that middle dose. And I've just realized behaviorally twice a day is way more likely. So even though it's a little bit less optimal, if I hit it, it has a better result. So I do 500 micrograms twice a day, and then I do 2 milligrams of TB500 every other day or 3 times a week. And I usually just worry about the 3 times a week because then I can reset every Monday. Now, when you buy these compounds, they come in powder forms and you need to mix them with bacteriostatic water. And you basically need to use a little dosage calculator because you got to find out, okay, let's take a 10 milligram vial of BPC 157. If you take 100 units or 1 cc of bacteriostatic water and put it in with 10 milligrams, which would be 10,000 micrograms, and you put that in there with 100 units of water, then every 1 unit of water will have 100 micrograms of BPC 157. So if you put that, and I like to use 2 milliliters of water because it's too hard to measure that small. So if I put 2 milliliters of water, every 1 unit of water is 50 micrograms. So if I fill up the Slim Pin to 10, that's like a very little amount. It's like a centimeter or 2. Then I will have 500 micrograms of BPC 157. So I do that, pin it once in the morning. And here's the thing. It's not so important with TB 500, but with BPC 57, you're trying to pin as close to the injury as possible, which can be brutal, man. Like when I was recovering from that ACL, MCL, meniscus nonsense from that quad accident 2 years ago, I was literally like sliding Slim Pins underneath my knee. Like it was, like I just get the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it. Here's the one thing I found throughout my experience. You can achieve the same effect by just going a little bit above the injury. Like gravity is our friend. It's going to pull compounds down your body. So if you have a problem in the knee, go an inch or 2 above the knee, inject there. It will kind of drain down into the knee throughout the day. You get the same effect. TB 500 is not quite as sensitive, but I've always just gone locally anyways because I'm like, well, it can't hurt, man. Some people just do BPC and TB sub-Q in the abdomen. I prefer, if I can, I am right at the injury. Like it just get in there. You know what I mean? Like if you're already going to be pinning yourself multiple times a day, don't be a bitch and just, just go right to the source. So anyways, I will do that cycle, 500 micrograms twice per day of BPC 157 and 2 milligrams of TB 500 3 times a week for 6 weeks. I have had damn near miraculous results of that. And I will do little touch-ups. I just got home from my goat hunt. I tweaked my right shoulder. It's kind of like a recurring injury for me. I've only got 2 weeks at home and then I'm gone again, man. I go bear, goat, elk, back to back to back. I'm home for 4 days in September. I don't have time to run a 6-week cycle. I always have BPC 157 and TB 500 in the house, get home from my goat hunt, load up the vials with a little bit of water, do my measurements. For the next 2 weeks, I'll run my little cycle and it'll be just enough to give my shoulder a bit of a jump start. And I would say 6 to 7 times a year, not even, maybe 3 to 4 times a year, I will do a little recovery cycle like that. And then maybe for something major, like if my knee really starts acting up in the off season, I'll do a full blown 6-week cycle. Currently, the best site I recommend for peptides is Werner Science. I know the guys who run it, and I will have a new recommendation. A buddy of mine is starting a peptide site, and I'll share that when I got it. But yeah. Thoughts on injectable L-carnitine? I see a good cardio boost above 500 milligrams. Oral is shit. I would agree that the oral is shit. I would also agree that a lot of people are experiencing benefits from injectable L-carnitine. Here's the thing. Is the juice worth the squeeze? What are your long-term benefits? If you were a competitive athlete and increasing your cardio is going to help you win a race, a short-term increase in cardio, you inject the L-carnitine, you run the race, you win. Okay, I can see that. But if you're training, you inject the L-carnitine, you have an increase in cardio while training. I mean, are you really, because you had a supplement-based improvement in performance, did that actually translate to you creating like greater cardiovascular capability overall? Or was that performance only temporarily created through the use of a supplement? Like if you were to train for 6 months with L-carnitine and then go on a hunt, or train for the same 6 months with no L-carnitine and then go on a hunt, are you actually going to have a performance increase on the hunt? Because you're not going to take L-carnitine with you on the hunt. And here's the other thing. Every single time you inject something into your body, you are risking injury. You could not aspirate properly and inject into a vein. You could get an infection. You could, there's a multitude of things that could go wrong. And so a lot of these guys who are injecting all these like aminos and peptides and L-carnitines like 5-6 times a day, you're like exponentially increasing your risk of something happening. I messed around with L-carnitine. For me, the juice was not worth the squeeze. There was a mild temporary performance increase, but I did not find that overall it was increasing like the baseline performance. So, and L-carnitine stings, man. When you start getting at the dose of 500 milligrams per milliliter, it's like putting acid in your arm. It sucks. And so, yeah, I don't bother with it. If you want to, yeah. Info on PEDs for general joint pain recovery without any actual injury, mostly knees that bother me. I'd say you're dealing with like general inflammation issues. I would look at your diet. I would start taking some fish oil. There's some other inflammation related supplements that you could start taking. Other than a little, general BPC 157 use, because it will reduce inflammation. You could try that, but there's not a lot of great recovery based. And again, how old are you? Because here's the thing, like, let's ask this question. Who should be on TRT? Okay. If you are experiencing like negatively life-altering symptoms that are related to low testosterone, like an inability to heal, an inability to feel competitive, low libido, depressed mood, high anxiety, building, fat in places you didn't used to build fat. If all of that is getting to the point where it has an overly negative impact on your life, and just going and taking one shot per week could make you feel better, I don't know. For me, that's a worthwhile trade-off. I can't answer that question for everybody, but I don't know how old you are. I don't know what your diet looks like. I don't know what your natural if your testosterone levels are in the shits, like if you were like me and you have 200, yeah, of course your knees hurt. Like you don't have enough testosterone to like repair your body. And so there could be a lot of explanations for that, but I don't have like a little magic PED pill that's specifically focused on just general inflammation and joint pain. There's nothing like that I know of. BPC 157 and TB 500 during hunt to keep inflammation and swelling down. Works on my bum knee. Yeah, I'm not walking around on a hunt with needles full of stuff. It's just not worth it. And again, I think if you've prepared yourself before the hunt, like me running this little BPC TB cycle on my shoulder, the inflammation will be fine for September. Like, yeah, the risk to reward of pinning yourself every day on a hunt is just not there for me. Experiences with peptides for joints, specifically lower back. I don't have any recommendations there. Do you think going on TRT at 26 is too young, or is it just purely symptom-based, not age-based? I wouldn't even say it's symptom-based. It's blood work-based. Go get your blood work taken. Is your testosterone low? Are you experiencing low testosterone symptoms? If so, go talk to a professional, see what they say. Do you jack your test dose during hunting season? I saw this question when it first came in and I got super excited because I know that's what everybody thinks. Here's the reality of the situation. Running high test sucks. Okay. You get cramps because you're like, get too much pump. So it's like you try and walk a half a mile and you get these like crippling calf pumps. You get lower back pumps that are super painful when doing any type of like deadlifts or rack pulls or squats. You put on 10 to 15 pounds when you jack up your test dose because it's considered a wet compound. You aromatize, so then you retain a bunch of water. You turn into a water buffalo. Like anything over a couple 100 milligrams a week the results are in direct opposition to what you want on a hunt, which is like lean, fast, great circulation. Your blood pressure jacks up when you take a bunch of testosterone. So no, it's the complete opposite. If you have some type of goal, like, okay, I'd like to put on an extra 5 or 10 pounds of mass this year, but still stay lean and effective in the backcountry, you program that. So like December through February, you run a small blast, you eat more food, you experience the negative symptoms of high testosterone, then you put on your extra muscle, and then you do a cut cycle like March to May. You go back down to TRT, lower your calories a little bit, get rid of the extra fat you've burnt off. And then when hunting season is here, you go right back on your T. I do the lowest dose of the year when I'm hunting because it's like, I don't want the extra weight. I don't want the extra water. I don't want the extra pumps. Like, I don't want the extra estrogen. Like, there's nothing about high testosterone that is going to help me on a hunt. I will, when I'm in a super busy season, I might drop right back to just 125 milligrams of test. And again, I may throw in that 100 milligrams of Primo or 100 milligrams of Mast simply because it doesn't aromatize. You're going to get a little bit of increased recovery, a little bit of increased anabolism. Like, there are some small benefits without a whole lot of drawbacks, but that's it, man. There is no, blasting during a hunt, last thing in the world you want to do. Would someone that has interrupted sleep benefit from TRT? Only if your interrupted sleep is caused by low testosterone. I mean, I still don't sleep well. I sleep much better now. I'm getting better scores on my Whoop, but I wake up 2 to 3 times a night, every single night. It could be from a bunch of stuff, man. When's your last cup of coffee? Are you eating close to bed? What's your home life like? What's your head like? Are you thinking about things at night that you should have dealt with during the day so you're not thinking about them at night? Deal with all those things first and go get some tests. Is your test low? If it is, it could be causing bad sleep. Yes. Best way to go about TRT in Canada with doctors refusing blood work. Go to a naturopath. Yeah. Yep. There are some online resources available in Canada now, and they will direct you to friendly doctors. My dad asked his doc about TRT, and he was told it will increase his risk of cancer. Thoughts? I mean, yeah. When you taking exogenous testosterone has been shown to increase your level of cancer. Now, eating a burger has been shown to increase your level of cancer. Char on a burger is a carcinogen. Are you going to stop eating burgers? I'm not saying it's worth getting cancer to go on TRT. What I am saying is I've looked at the information. Running a low dose TRT does not, for me, create a risk that I think it is undue. I'm willing to experience that risk. I don't think it's that big a deal. When you start blasting to the moon on a bunch of compounds, yeah, I mean, that's a problem. Okay, this next gentleman asked about retatrutide, and let's talk about all the GLP-1 agonists. These are like semaglutide, tetrazutide, retatrutide, Ozempic, all of these like new age weight loss compounds. Now, when these first came out and Ozempic blew up on the scene, from what I had read and from listening to the people I trust, I was 100% completely opposed to it. I was like, there's nothing good about this. This is brutal. It's just eating people's souls away. We are now on our third generation of GLPs. So retatrutide is the most advanced GLP agonist. And it actually acts on 3 different mechanisms which inhibit hunger and slow digestion. And now there's a lot more research. And here's what I'm going to say. Let's take bodybuilding, for example. Everybody looks at the specimens in bodybuilding and they're like, oh, that's just because he has genetics. But then when they look at how hard people work, they're like, oh yeah, but you just don't have, you don't grind enough, or that's a guy who has a lot of discipline. You just got to be more disciplined. It's like people think your physical characteristics are genetically derived, but your mental characteristics are somehow will-based. And I got some bad news for you. It is an equal combination of nature and nurture in both. Your genetics plays an equal role in the amount of discipline you have as it does in the amount of muscle you can grow. It plays an equal role with how hungry you get or the intensity with which you experience the sensation of hunger, as it does with how your body partitions carbohydrates. Like, listen, there are just some dudes who don't really care about food. And no matter what they eat, they got a 6-pack. They are not stronger. They are not more disciplined. They are not smarter. That's just the genetic hand of cards they were dealt. There's other guys who are hungry all the time. And no matter what they eat, they gain weight. There's some exceptions to that, and that's just the genetic hand of cards they were dealt. A lot of these compounds we've been talking about today are exogenous ways to kind of make up for whatever genetic shit hand you were dealt. And so I've actually come to change my opinion on retatrutide, specifically because it's a lot more advanced than the other ones. I think there's a lot of dudes who really want to eat a little bit less and just lose 5 or 10 pounds. And it is just harder for them to do it. That's the fact of the matter. I'm not making excuses, but it's harder. If there can be a little compound that can just take the edge off and give them a little bit of help, I'm not opposed to it. Here's the thing. You have to keep your protein levels very high. You have to keep some type of strenuous activity in there. Here's the problem with people that are doing Ozempic and semaglutide and they show up looking like skeletons. It's just making them not eat. And then it's catabolizing their muscle tissue to feed them protein. And they're just wasting away to nothing. That is not what we're looking for here. We're backcountry hunters. We want to be savages in the mountains. Going up there starving and looking like Skeletor is not going to help us. But shaving off 5 to 10 pounds of fat during the off season in a structured, slow, methodical manner, that will help us. So if you're one of those dudes and you're having problems, I think a low dose retatrutide with high protein, high exercise, I think it can absolutely be the little helping hand that you were looking for. And in my research, I think a reasonable starting dose is something like 2 milligrams per week. It's injectable. From what I understand, it's going to help lower hunger sensations. It doesn't have any magic. This is what people confuse about Ozempic. It doesn't have any magic fat burning qualities. It just helps you eat less. So it's even more important at that point what you do eat, because you're eating less of it. So it has to be high quality food, high levels of protein. But yeah, I've completely kind of switched my mind on it. I don't think it should be used as a get out of jail free card for lazy people. But again, if sleep is dialed, training is dialed, and you're having a little problem getting food dialed, but you're willing to do the work, I think Reta is definitely, when administered appropriately, an effective option. Your personal experience, usage, and timeline in the life regarding usage. Well, that was the first hour of this podcast. What is the peptide availability like in Canada? It's great. Go to wernerscience.com. It'll be at your front door in 2 days. Besides TRT, is anything else available covered for free in Canada with Extended Health? Well, TRT is not free in Canada. You got to pay for it. All your tests, all your everything. If you have some type of health plans through your work, it can be covered, but like your regular health plan is not covering it. It's not covering GH, it's not covering TRT, it's not covering anything. Oral BPC 157, does it work? I'm just going to say no. Like, not really. The nasal sprays have been shown, again, to get the amount that you need in order to actually create an effect. I think you have to inject your base. You want a little extra on top. I think the nasal sprays and the orals maybe could be a mild benefit. Estrogen blockers for TRT, are they needed? Is HGH relatively safe and long-term issues? My recommendation is that you should not need to take estrogen blockers while on TRT. You only need to take estrogen blockers or aromatase inhibitors when your testosterone, when your exogenous testosterone gets so high that your compensatory estrogen production gets out of hand. Then you need to knock it down. But at that point, you're starting to deal with a cascade of all kinds of bullshit effects that are just not worth it. Even the bodybuilders I know now, even when they go on blasts, they just keep creeping that test up until the estrogen gets too high, then they stop, because it's really been shown that these aromatase inhibitors are not good for you. HGH is relatively safe at low dose. I would say 2 to 3 units a day. You could take that for the rest of your life and there's no negative side effects. Disadvantages. If I start, can I not stop? Maybe some can, some can't for others. Here's what I'll tell you. If you are over 40 years old and you start going on TRT and you're on it for more than a couple months, you're done. For all intents and purposes, you're going to be sticking a needle in your ass once a week for the rest of your life. And when somebody asks me for advice these days or asks me my opinion based on my experience, that's the first thing I say. Like, listen, man, I would not go back. I am glad I've been on TRT for, I guess in September, it'll almost be 10 years. I don't even think about it. If I walk in my kitchen, I take a shot in my ass once a week. I don't give a shit, but you got to think about it when you go on vacation. It's a prescription you got to go get filled. Like, it's just one more kind of bullshit thing that you got to do with your life every week. And some people don't like the idea of being kind of like linked, to this thing long term that they have no choice about. So that's something you got to answer for yourself, but it is real. Listen, if you're 25 and you do one cycle of gear and you stop, your endogenous system's probably going to kick back in. It's not that big a deal. You can use things like Clomid and other compounds to like kickstart it. But if you're over 40, you already have low T, and then you go on exogenous T, you do that for any length of time, you're done. You're going to need it for the rest of your life. Any regrets or adverse side effects that you have noticed from starting TRT? Not the TRT. Again, let's be very specific about this. From some of the blasts I've done while bodybuilding, lots of negative effects. Blood pressure went through the roof. I'm sure I've taken a couple of years off my life. My mood, I was cranky. Just physically walking around is uncomfortable at those weights. I'm sure there were other health effects that I don't even know about yet. 100%. I do not recommend, unless you want to be a professional bodybuilder, I don't think anybody needs to take, more than 100 to 200 milligrams of test per week to get the best benefits to risk ratio. What compounds do you run during extended hunting season? Do you bring test along? Kind of already answered this. I don't do anything special anymore. And unless it's going to be more than 2 weeks, if I'm going on the road, and I'm going to be doing a couple hunts back to back, maybe I'll keep a little bit in my suitcase and I'll do a shot in between hunts at the hotel. Testosterone does not need to be refrigerated like peptides or GH. But nothing other than a little bit of test and maybe a little bit of primo. Do you push PEDs and food in the off season from hunting to prep for low calorie hunts? I do not. Size is the last thing I'm worried about. If you were in a different scenario and you're like a little skinny mini and you want to put on 5 pounds of muscle in the off season, I can see an argument to do this, like the scenario I described earlier. But for me, that's the last thing I want. I'm trying to be lean, mean, crazy cardio, crazy endurance. I mean, right now, 98% of my training is zone 2 on a Stairmaster. And the amount, I was a fucking monster on my last goat hunt. I'm 46 years old, 47 next month. And other than maybe one hunt in my life, I have never been this fit. I could go and go and go and go. You know, my hunting partner left after day 2. We'll get into that. But it was like, yeah, dude, I crushed the mountains this year. And that's all from zone 2 training, very low test, no big compounds, little bit of BPC and TB for like injury repair, no GH, no nothing. The training is not even that hard. It's hard to find enough time to do the volume, but that's it. I think 90% of the hunting community is out to lunch right now with what they're doing to train. Like, just watch these like mayhem hunt CrossFit guys. And I'm like, what are you? Yeah, okay, your CrossFit workouts are great, but go look at the literature. Like, you are not training the energy systems that are required for endurance. Like, yeah, these guys are specimens. They're freak athletes. Okay, great. For 90% of the people listening to this podcast that just want to be better in the backcountry, none of that shit is necessary. In fact, the literature shows you actually create an aerobic deficiency syndrome when you train at those high intensity levels. That is not only not helping you, it's hurting you. And I can tell you, as a dude in my mid 40s, I've done everything. I've done bodybuilding. I've done used to compete in CrossFit, used to compete in jiu-jitsu, used to compete in bodybuilding. I have done everything under the sun. And this new like zone 2 work and following the principles of training for the uphill athlete has impacted my ability in the backcountry more positively than any other thing I've ever done. Peptides are test for recovery. My boys gave me mixed reviews contrary to literature. This is not an either or question. If you have low test, you should be replacing it with exogenous testosterone. Then, if you have an acute injury that peptides are going to be beneficial for, use the peptides to heal the injury. Test is not like I'm sore, I'm going to take some test. Test is like, I'm low, I'm going to decide to go on TRT. I'm now on TRT for the rest of my life. Somebody's asking about Rad 140 and MK 677. These are very popular SARMs. Garbage, don't do them. A lot of questions on BPC 157. If I'm taking prescribed TRT and run out in the backcountry, can oral Anavar be used to maintain levels? No. I already got into that in blood saturation levels. That's not how testosterone metabolizes in your body. Take your shots 1 week apart. If you run out in the middle, don't stress. Take it when you get home. If you're going to be gone for 2 straight weeks, bring 1 syringe, like in a closed, sealed package, a little bit of test in a vial, and a half a dozen alcohol swabs. And make sure you swab the vial, swab the syringe, swab the injection site, and do an injection mid-hunt. I've done it lots. It's not the end of the world. How do you respond to anyone trying to shake you for using a GLP-1 agonist? And then the next question is thoughts on Retta. I get it. I get it, because everybody thought it was the easy button. And if you are just going to take it, not eat, not train, and look like Skeletor, I am going to kind of think of you negatively, because I don't think that's appropriate. Like, you're just being unhealthy to look better. You're not healthier. You're not going to perform better. Like, if that's how you lose weight getting ready for the backcountry, you are in for a rude awakening, because you are going to be weak and slow when you get back there. But like the situation I described earlier, if you're using this as just like a little helping hand, do you know what I mean? Like, listen, the old way to lose fat was like the caffeine, ephedrine, aspirin, the ECA stack. And you would take it 3 times a day. I've gone on a couple of these cycles way back in the day. It's the same thing. A lot of people take a little bit of T3, like 25 micrograms of T3 once a day, ups their metabolism a little bit. A lot of people take a little bit of Clen, 50 micrograms of clenbuterol a day to like up their metabolism a little bit and help in fat loss. There are all kinds of like little things you can do. If you have the major building blocks taken care of, sleep, diet, training, and then you're using like a little bit of help to get the performance that you want, and you're keeping, at the end of the day, your performance is the milestone that you're headed for, I think it's great. And just don't worry about people, man. You know, I was having this thought the other day.
people confuse having others think of them favorably as success. Okay. Let's take bodybuilding, for example. I had to walk around for 2 years, basically looking like a fat piece of shit. Like my face was bloated, 270 pounds. I looked like a big football player. I did not look like a bodybuilder because I knew what the goal was. The goal was to get on stage so shredded that you could see my spleen. And I knew that to do that, I had to sacrifice what other people were going to think of me for a couple of years. I knew that when I walked into a room, I was like, wow, that guy's doesn't need a cheeseburger. But achieving my goal was more important to me than what people think of me. And if you're on a weight loss diet, who gives a shit? Don't tell anybody you're on a GLP-1. What business is it of theirs? And if they do find out and they do think of you negatively, fuck them. You're on your own goal. Walk your own road. As long as you are, listen, let's take another example. I've talked about this a lot. For the first time in 2025, Mindful Hunter, Forged in the Backcountry, Mindful Reviews, the outfitting, it's all coming together. You know, between myself and my clients, I've taken 7 animals down this year. I wanted to build a platform that was about the authentic journey of somebody actually learning how to go in the backcountry and hunt. I didn't want, there's a lot of other ways I could have gone out and killed animals, but it was important to me how I did it. And it took me longer than most people think it should have taken me. And I had to live with a lot of criticism from a lot of people, but I knew what the goal was, right? I knew what the yard marker was at the end of the field. Like I knew the North Star. I knew where I was headed. And I knew that if I stayed focused enough and if I did shit my way, put blinders on, fuck everybody else, and just keep doing what I needed to do to get better, eventually it was going to come together. It has now come together. And still, I could not give a shit what anybody else thinks other than my small circle. I have a very small circle of people that mean a lot to me, and what they think about me matters to me a lot. The rest of the world can kiss my ass because I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I know where I'm headed, and I know that I have integrity about my goals. So if that's where you're at, and you know that you need to take a little bit of a helping hand in order to reach your goals, fuck everybody else. Don't worry about what they think. Oh, another mention for a peptide site. A friend of mine, if you want to look her up on Instagram, Miss Nurse Melly, she has a discount code for peptides from Pure Life Peptides. Go give her a follow. And that's another good source for Canadians for peptides. BPC 157 for Achilles tendinopathy. I think that would be an ideal use case. I would go up the calf a little bit. Jacking right into your Achilles tendon is going to be insanity. But if you go up the calf a little bit and run some BPC and TB right in there for 6 weeks, I think that would be a great option. TRT versus BHRT, which would you choose or suggest? BHRT is bioidentical hormone replacement therapy as opposed to testosterone replacement therapy. Most of the testosterone that you're going to buy over the counter actually comes from yams, and it's a synthetic testosterone. From all of my research, the only real benefit from bioidentical hormones is for drug testing. Your body doesn't really know the difference between the two. So, and I don't even know where you would get bioidentical testosterone. I like when you go get a prescription, it's synthetic testosterone. So yeah, just do synthetic. Best videos, books, articles, etc. for learning about peptides. It's YouTube. Reliable sources on YouTube. Derek from More Plates, More Dates is a fantastic resource. Ben Greenfield, I've read a lot of his articles. He's really good. Go look for guys you can trust on YouTube. There's a lot of good information on there. Yeah, long-term usage and effects. Everyone wants fast, easy, doesn't think long-term. Again, I think moderate use is the key here. And I think you need to monitor things like your lipids, cholesterol levels, your liver enzymes, and your blood pressure. Like those are the biggies. Also, you need to keep an eye on your kidneys. blasting really high levels of gear can screw your kidneys, and your kidneys do not heal really. But as long as you're doing regular blood work, and as long as you're keeping your dosages of everything like realistic, I don't think you have, there's long-term risks to everything. If I go on gear, will I get bigger bucks? No. You will also not get little bigger balls. Your balls will shrink a bit, but who cares? It's like, I care about the size of my dick. I don't really care about the size of my balls. You should also bring up the risks like blood clots when messing with your hormones. That's a funny comment. I don't really know why, blood clots specifically would be your concerns. I've talked about the risks a lot. And again, these are dosage dependent risks. If you are taking a doctor monitored level of TRT and doing appropriate blood work, I do not believe your risk of all-cause mortality will be elevated at all. I think you're going to be in the same risk factor that you were always in. You start jacking 700 mgs of test a week with 400 mgs of tren, you are going to be in a whole new category. Would you ever suggest any for an average Joe wanting to lose weight or get stronger for hunting? No, I would not. Again, I'm going to keep saying this. It's testosterone replacement theory. If it doesn't need to be replaced, you don't need it. Because again, you should only be going on enough to get you back to what is like considered a natural, safe level. And again, I believe most people, here's the thing, here's what's going to happen. All right. Let me talk to you about average Joe. Okay. Average Joe's kind of lazy. Average Joe likes having his snacks in front of the TV every night. Average Joe thinks he's busier than he actually is. He's got more time on his hands than he knows because he's not that good at organizing his day. Doesn't really train as much as he should. Doesn't get great sleep. And he thinks if I take some test, it's going to magically make me fitter and fix all that shit. And here's what it's going to do. Because he's going to jump on Reddit, he's going to do a cycle of 500 milligrams of test per week, because that is like the oldest cycle in the book. He's going to gain 20 pounds. 3 pounds of it is going to be muscle and 17 pounds of it is going to be fat and water. And he's going to get heavier. He's going to get slower. He's going to get an elevated blood pressure. He's not going to lose any fat. He's not going to train any harder. And he's actually going to end up in a worse place for next year's hunting season. That's what's going to happen to average Joe if he jumps on a cycle of gear. Okay. Now, if average Joe wakes up with a fire under his ass one day and he's like, this is enough bullshit. And for 6 to 12 months, he reins in his diet. He trains like a savage. He gets a good night's sleep every night. He loses a little bit of his belly fat and he's getting everything on track. And at the end of that, he's like, I just don't have the fire that I had when I was in my 20s. I'm not feeling the same as I used to. And he goes in and he gets measured and he's like, oh, my test is at 200. He starts taking 125 milligrams a week and he keeps doing all the shit he's doing. Then it's going to be worth it. So like fix the major shit that's in your control first. The TRT, the PEDs, the peptides, none of those are miracle drugs. If you don't have the major shit taken care of first, they're not going to do anything. They're just going to make you bloated, with extra water and heavier and slower. I'm telling you. That was the last question. Holy Lord, folks. Did we get into it today? There you have it. I'm sure, listen, I am not an expert. I am not a doctor. I've been doing this stuff for almost 10 years. I'd like to think I'm fairly well educated and I've done a lot of research and I've talked to a lot of people who know what they're talking about. I did my best to share my experience with these things and try and, give you what my opinions are on what are some good ideas and what are some bad ideas. If I got anything like incredibly wrong, I apologize for that. I'm going to put this one up on YouTube as well. I think that's a better place to have a conversation about some of the questions people may have. So if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments section below. I'll go over the housekeeping notes one more time. All forged boxers are back in stock and shipping immediately. And for outfitting, I got 2 spots left for archery mule deer in Alberta, mid-October. I got 1 spot left for any weapon mule deer in BC, late November. And spots for spring bear are closing up fast. So if you want any information about any of those hunts, jay@mindfulhunter.com. If you can engage with this content in any way, shape, or form, like, comment, share, subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, thank you for tuning in.